Aviators, to my third SCUM tutorial and a follow-up to my first close quarter combat tutorial. If you haven't watched the first one, I highly recommend going back and taking a look at the first video on this topic, as this is going to follow on from that and add to it. I've linked the first video in the description for your convenience, and with that, and without further ado, let's get into it. First topic I'm going to cover is graphics and mouse settings for PvP. These are the settings I use and are not exhaustive. However, I have good reasons for these settings and they will help you when you dial in your settings. Firstly, in the video settings, I'm running the game at 4K full screen. Now this will depend entirely on your monitor, and you should play at the max resolution of your monitor, as that's where you're going to get the most visual fidelity. As for gamma, I just run what looks nice and isn't too washed out. Again, this depends on your setup. You may want to crank this up if you're finding the game's too dark in certain lighting conditions, but it's up to you. As for FOV, I'm running 90 FOV for first person with 80 for third person and 90 for third person driving. The higher this is, the more the world is going to be visible on your screen, but do consider that the higher the FOV is, the smaller targets will appear. Some people like to run low FOV in first person with high FOV in third person, so that when you aim down the sight at people, they get a slight zoom advantage. This is a known tactic from the days of Counter-Strike. However, personally, I have tested this and found it not really worth it over the extra situational awareness afforded by high FOV. For the graphics settings, I'll set everything to low except for texture quality, texture memory, and streaming speed, which is set to epic. The reason for this is that any of the other special effects only serve to make the game look prettier, but they may make it harder to spot players. The reason texture quality and texture memory are on epic, along with streaming speed, is that texture quality makes it easier to differentiate between surfaces such as concrete, wall, and a player wearing grey clothing. If you set texture quality to low, you'll get a better frame rate, but you'll find that a lot of surfaces blend together, making it hard to spot players. Texture memory and streaming speed are performance related and will prevent texture pop-in, which can be perceived as movement, as well as prevent game bugs such as falling through the map. For DLSS, I set it to quality with frame generation and reflex on. With DLSS, any lower than quality can cause players to blend into the environment and cause lower overall image quality. I'm currently experimenting with DirectX 12 and DLSS override to use the new transformer model through the NVIDIA app, which greatly enhances image quality and removes a lot of the artifacting like image ghosting. This is unstable and I get game crashes from time to time using this, so use with caution. If you intend to try these experimental settings, keep in mind it may crash your game. Using frame generation with reflex is great if you're already getting a decent frame rate. With these settings at 4K, I'm getting on average 150 FPS. Frame generation can introduce input lag, while reflex reduces input lag. You're going to have to experiment here and make sure that your mouse feels smooth with these settings. Of course, everyone's PC being different, you're going to have to find the settings that work best for your setup. Remember, you want to maintain the highest FPS that you can, as your frame rate can greatly impact your performance. This brings us to mouse settings. The mouse settings are pretty subjective and will differ player to player. However, there are some common trends in the esports space that seem to indicate there's a correlation between low mouse sensitivity and high performance. As the old adage goes, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and it seems to ring true here. I highly recommend looking up some mouse sensitivity guides and using them as a base for tweaking your own settings here. The tips I can give are: go lower than you think you should if you are finding that you're over-aiming in fast-paced engagements. If you flick your mouse to the right to a target on your right and the reticle goes past the enemy and you have to adjust left to land the shot. And if you're struggling with sniping, i.e. sniping a small target far away is proving difficult as you lack fine adjustment due to high mouse sensitivity, as well as over adjusting for recoil. Go higher mouse sensitivity if you're having no issues with sniping but struggle in close quarters, getting on target fast enough and have to move the mouse way too much on the mouse pad. You should be using all of your mouse pad, but you shouldn't have to lift the mouse over and over and over again to complete a 360-degree turn. And lastly, keep all your aiming sensitivity the same in the settings as seen here. It can be tempting to go lower down the sight sense and scope sense. However, if you do, you're going to have a harder time getting used to using your mouse, as your sensitivity is constantly changing and is going to prevent things clicking and prevent you getting the right game feel. It can take some getting used to, but once you are, you'll see the balance between high and low sense that works for you will make a massive difference in PvP. The one last thing I'm going to touch on in the settings section is the use of external programs such as Reshade to increase things such as gamma beyond the settings available in game. This is used by people to see at night to blow out the contrast of players, etc. My recommendation is to not use this at all. It is cheating and is likely to be cracked down on in the future. I do not believe players should be permitted to use external programs for that purpose, and many other games in the same genre have updated the anti-cheat to prevent the use of these programs. You're much better off dialing in your own PC settings and game settings to get the best image quality you can rather than trying to rely on external programs. Alright, now I'm going to move on to movement tactics and tips and tricks you can use during PvP. These are SCUM specific and work in the context of the game. SCUM is pretty unique, as we discussed in the first video, and that affords us some unique tips and tricks to make use of. For the first gameplay tip, I'm going to again touch on the third-person peeking mechanic and another trick you can use regarding it. As per the last video, we discussed the third-person rendering mechanic in SCUM. In that video, I go into greater depth on how it works and how you can use it, but there's something I didn't touch on, is that this mechanic doesn't apply to bushes. What this means is that rather than hiding in a bush, you can hide behind it and look over the top of it to spot players, while they cannot see you, as seen here. I can see this enemy, but he cannot see me, allowing me to shoot him through the bush. The second gameplay tip here is shooting through cover. SCUM has got bullet penetration mechanics in the game, but this is rather inconsistent. You'll find that certain materials that shouldn't stop bullets will stop them, and this can be an issue. However, if you're in a bind, you can shoot through some materials and it is worth giving it a shot. Just keep in mind that sometimes glass is going to stop a 50 BMG, or a thin wooden rail is going to stop 5.56. But when it does work, you can quickly put down target without having to wait for them to peek. I imagine the SCUM devs will eventually get this working properly and will be able to rely on shooting through concealment. The third gameplay tip I'm going to share is based on movement. If you watch videos of some of the best players, you'll see that they are constantly moving, behaving unpredictably, and thus making it harder for the enemy to hit them. This leads into a few subjects such as the new stamina system, carry weight, bunny hopping, etc. But the hint I can give regarding this is you want to be carrying below your maximum carry weight. Now you can increase your carry weight by increasing strength. However, the more muscle your character has, the heavier they are, and this can actually reduce maximum running speed. Being as fast as you can is very important when we get into aggression section, as dominating the opponent has a lot to do with speed. If you're over encumbered, you're not going to be able to move as fast, and you're not going to be able to quickly rush or flank an opponent. My recommendation is all 5s in the character stats at around 90 kilograms or less. The lowest body fat you can manage to keep your weight down. Another 1%er you can look at is that the female characters are slightly smaller in profile, although they have the same hitbox. So they are slightly harder to spot, as well as they can squat to go to the bathroom rather than standing, which means you can hide in a bush to take care of that business rather than standing there ready to be shot. Most hardcore PvPers are going to be using the DLC characters such as Danny Trejo or Lewis Moncada, because they can respawn with a weapon. If you find that your playstyle doesn't fit the crazy sprinting Danny Trejo on crack playstyle, then this isn't a necessity and you can choose a custom character. The fourth gameplay tip is going to be regarding stealth. Now, something to consider is that at distance, many objects are not going to render in, such as small bushes, small rocks, grass, small building components, etc., such as air conditioners. This means if you're fighting someone far away, you need to consider what you are hiding behind. If you're using the settings I mentioned earlier, you're going to be able to see that many objects simply do not render in, but you will notice there are some that do. These are things such as trees, large rocks, large buildings, and so on. You're going to have to make use of these items to get into cover, as anything else you may be risking being exposed and shot. At intermediate and close distance, you're going to be able to make better use of objects that still render in, and here is where the next gameplay tips come in. The fifth gameplay tip is getting into weird spots. If you can climb into a small niche, crevice, or stand on a map object to peek over a fence or a barricade, you may be able to get the drop on an enemy as they may not see you. This should go without saying, but the element of surprise is a big factor in winning fights in SCUM. You should also be aware that you too can be shot through these small angles and strange positions where only a small part of your body is visible. Now, finding these spots isn't going to be straightforward. You're going to have to think on your feet and be creative. A good rule of thumb for these spots is that if you have heard someone, if you can get some slight elevation over the opponent, then it's no longer a fair fight, quite literally getting the drop on them. Now, the sixth gameplay tip is that once you've committed to attacking an opponent, you're going to have to be aggressive. Taking pot shots is all well and good, but if you don't follow through, you may very well end up killed instead. This means in close quarters, you're going to have to jump on them and dominate. Don't give them a chance to react. This is seen a lot as used by Danny Trejo players with machetes. The meta for them is to just rush and overwhelm and steal the gear of their opponent. For them, it doesn't matter if they die, they'll just respawn and try it again. So you want to overwhelm the opponent. If you manage to injure them, then push them and finish them off. In close quarters, you can use what is known as peeker's advantage. Essentially, due to how server latency is calculated in close quarters, the disconnect between packets you are sending to the server, your movement in this case, and what the server is then relaying to the opponent, favors the aggressive player by a fraction of a second. possibly longer depending on ping. What this means is if you rush around a corner, there's a brief moment where you will see the enemy before they see you, meaning you get to shoot first. The last topic for today's video is going to cover a couple more 1%er tips and tricks that can help you out. There's small things that add up and can be used to great effect. Some are SCUM specific and others are general tips that can be the difference between living and dying in SCUM PvP. Did you know that in SCUM you can tell if someone's armed by the sound of their footsteps? Listen closely. You can hear if someone's carrying a weapon or not. There's a very subtle difference. However, if you know someone is unarmed by their footsteps, you may decide to attack them. Play mind games with your opponent with leaning. If you're in a firefight, you can throw a left or right lean in to throw off your opponent's aim, moving your head hitbox to the left or the right. This is something I picked up playing other shooters such as PUBG, and it does work. Did you know that the human brain is extremely good at identifying faces? It's in our biology to the point where we'll see faces and things that aren't even there. What's the first thing you typically see when you see an enemy? For me, it's almost always the big round pink coloured face. What does that mean for you? Well, simply cover your face. Wear gear that hides your face. This is a small detail, but it's absolutely useful. Cover your face up and an enemy might not pick you up when quickly scanning. And last but not least, if you play with a squad, practice together. Get into death matches and fight each other. Do it often and break up the monotony of the grind with a daily death match. With the new armband system, it's critical that you get used to identifying your teammates and getting used to each other's playstyles and callouts. When it comes to identification, consider wearing the same camo. My squad was doing this before the nameplate patch, and it's made the transition to no nameplates much easier. Get in those reps and practice. It makes all the difference in the world. And that's it. Thanks again for tuning in. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe. It means a lot that people enjoy this content, and I'm happy to keep going. If there's anything else you'd like to see, please feel free to let me know, and I'll let you know what I can do. Until next time, peace.